Aloha, beautiful beings, and welcome to another episode of the Yoni Havana Podcast, where we explore consciousness, looking into how things work in the universe so we can enjoy life more and become more whole. Before we dive into today's show, I'd like to invite you to explore two experiences that I'm passionate about. First, I'm excited to announce a brand new product that I launched with my mentor, Dr. Aubrey Degnan, which is called Rising Awareness Sessions. If you're on a path of self-discovery and seeking deeper connection, these sessions are for you. Ideal for those feeling stuck in personal growth, navigating inner work alone, seeking connection with like-minded individuals, or curious about enlightenment. Rising Awareness Sessions help you connect with your inner nature and realize the wisdom of oneness. These sessions include meditations, breathwork, collective vulnerable shares, individual deep dives, and spiritual teachings. Through self-observation, thought awareness, and mind quieting, you'll cultivate a deeper understanding of yourself and the present moment. Benefits include healing emotional, psychological, and physical trauma, reducing stress, expanding consciousness, and enhancing your overall well-being. You'll gain a sense of purpose, strengthen relationships, and align with your soul's mission. Visit our website at risingawareness.net to start your transformative journey today. Second, if you're a man ready to transform your life and connect with your authentic self, I want to invite you to the Men of Integrity Retreats, a profound 4-day journey towards authentic manhood, led by Michael Tiernell and me, Yoni Havana. These retreats help men embrace integrity, heal past wounds, and build a supportive community. Discover what it means to be a man of integrity, taking responsibility, speaking kindly, acting with honor, and embracing vulnerability. A retreat includes deep dives into personal growth, ceremonies for healing, and workshops on lifelong learning. Connect with like-minded men and become a better husband, father, and leader. Visit our website noi.community to learn more and take the first step toward your next evolution. In today's show, we have a deep and funny conversation with Jordan Bowditch. He's a men's performance and relationship coach, kinda conscious comedian, and BROfessional edu-tainer. In this episode, Jordan shares the juicy love story of how he met his wife, Alexa Bowditch, also known as Dat Sex Chick on Instagram, his spiritual journey with Christianity and his own connection to God, the poignant experience of welcoming his first son, Gabriel, who was born with Down syndrome and passed away just an hour and a half after birth, the lowdown of his powerful ManMeet retreats, and much more. Please note, I recorded this show with Jordan at the end of 2023, shortly after he lost his firstborn. As of today, June 26, 2024, I'm happy to report and congratulate Jordan and his Alexa for welcoming their second son into the world just under 2 weeks ago. Congratulations to you all. If you find value in this conversation, please share with someone you love. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy this heart-opening conversation with Jordan Bowditch. Aho. Jordan, thank you for coming on to the show. Welcome.
Happy to be here, my friend.
Good to see you. I want to tell
Me
you,
too.
I've seen your face for the first time around 2017, 2018, when you were doing the Mystic Misfits with,
I love that.
yeah, I was working for Mike Bledsoe at the time. Seems like you were living around the same
Great.
area. I was living in San Francisco at the time. I'm actually heading back towards that area tomorrow for a men's retreat that I'm hosting. So I figured, as I was seeing, like, we have this in common, and I've seen where you've evolved to, in the past few years. I was actually off social media for a few years, just hankering down and staying focused and having a couple kids of my own.
Cool.
Yeah, it started, I guess, first one, my wife was pregnant in 2018. So yeah, a lot of things, happened and evolved since. And yeah, I wanted to chat. I've been seeing you until then and I love what you do, and we have a lot in common. And I figured we got to have a conversation because I think just to like start this conversation, I think the work we're doing and you're doing it differently and I do what I'm doing differently, but I keep getting it from the outside, just kind of by request and by popular demand. Men's work, highly needed
Mhm.
and highly appreciated that I'm doing it. I was called to it organically. I did not plan on doing men's work by any means. So, anyways, here we are. Let's kick it off. And so, yeah, you just got back from a men's retreat. I'd love to hear all about it.
Yeah, man. Let's see. Yeah, similar to you, kind of the men's work found me, and it is so hot right now. The men's work, I'll say. And my approach to it is very playful. It's sincere, but it's not overly serious. And my ManMeet summit that I just did in San Diego is that in a nutshell. I mean, it's called ManMeet. It's kind of the name is playful. It's kind of homoerotic in a sense, and that's how I like to approach this stuff again is we get to have a lot of fun and playfully transform and maybe not do it the most right all the time, but directionally we're spot on. And so, yeah, I did it at a resort in Carlsbad called the Omni La Costa, which was a new setting for me. I typically do the more like all in, all inclusive retreat type of setup where I'll get an Airbnb, have catered meals, and we have roughly 20 to 30 or so guys that all stay together. And I love that. I've been doing that for many years. I did it with the Mystic Misfits back in the day. And it's a lot of work. As you know, hosting these events, it's a lot. And so I was trying to find something that I could do more frequently because those, again, all in style retreats, I can really comfortably for myself with all the other things I have going on in my life, 1 to 2, maybe 3 of those a year. Because my wife, we do this business together. I hold down the men's side of things. She holds down the women's, and then we support couples together. And so, yeah, this new setting for the tried and true tricks, so to speak, that I have up my sleeve was really fun, great proof of concept. It was just, for me personally, I had a little bit more downtime. I wasn't having to navigate a ton of those logistics. And the guys got to have a great time at this awesome resort with all kinds of great food on site, the beach right down the street. It was really special.
What is the essence of the men meet? Is it about becoming a better man, getting
Mhm.
community? What are the main things that the men are coming to receive?
Yeah. Let's see. I would all of the above and more. I think that a few things that are my sweet spot. One is call it emotional alchemy. And I'm admittedly kind of uh, borrowing that phrase from a mentor of mine who was also at the retreat, Brandon Hawk. And so a lot of uh, the issues are in the tissues kind of concepts, bioenergetics, somatic therapy. That seems to be the hot buzzword and term that encompasses a lot of what I do and what I'm speaking to here. Um, Certainly polarity. I don't use that word all that often because same thing, it feels just a little overused. I used to use it a lot, but yeah, definitely grounding into our masculine strength, our essence, not being afraid of it, uh, overcoming the somewhat common narrative that, being masculine is like kind of some of the old school masculine core tenets are dangerous, are unacceptable. And the nice guy syndrome that is so common that, yeah, I certainly personally can relate to. Uh, and yeah, getting really comfortable and fun comfortable with my big emotions, with my anger, uh, recognizing that my anger is not inherently wrong. Actually, quite the opposite. It's very normal. It's healthy. And the question is, what do I do with that?
Mm.
How do I, when it comes up, flow it appropriately and not be hijacked by it and just consumed and overcome? But how do I leverage it responsibly, appropriately, and channel it for the greater good? And so that's a lot of what we would do is kind of conjure emotions in like a safe setting.
Wow.
And then be like, okay, cool. What is under that emotion of anger? And then what is under that? And then what's under that? And getting out of kind of the head, this upper region that modern society is kind of glamorizes, addicted to some level, and get down into the lower parts, the chest, the belly, the sex center, the balls. And yeah, so that's like a lot of what we do as men in that setting.
That's awesome. Legit. I love it. I want to go over a few things in terms that you touched on that I want to clarify for the audience. So first one, bioenergetics. What does it mean?
Mm-hmm. I mean, at the most baseline level, it's tapping into the energy of your biology in the name, right? Now, what that can look like, it's a big umbrella. It was popularized in like the early mid 1900s, Alexander Lohan and others. And the idea is that certain postures, certain movements, certain types of breathing can unlock things in the body. So I reference the issues are in the tissues.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk therapy out there, communication, authentic relating, super important. When I was first getting into this work and just my conscious path, if you will, in personal development, that was the starting point. So, okay, how do I use my language better? How do I cast spells consciously instead of passively? How do I take ownership with my language using I statements instead of projecting with the yous and the we's? You know, when you do this and you do this, well, no, I, and owning my experience and all that stuff is so important. And then I was exposed to a mentor, Elliot Hulse, who some people will hear that name and think, whoa, he was a mentor of yours, because he's rather radical. And I would say in the past handful of years, he's really doubled down on his radical nature. But nonetheless, he really exposed me to a lot of these concepts in the realm of bioenergetics and specifically Osho. So there's a great documentary that doesn't really do him and his teachings as a guru justice, but it's called Wild Wild Country on Netflix. It's very entertaining. But his teachings in this realm, very impactful, very potent. And so bringing it back to the talk therapy, the counterbalance to that is body psychotherapy. That's another way you could look at bioenergetics, is body psychotherapy. And so instead of just focusing on the brain, it's like, okay, what's in the infinite intelligence of the body? Because there's a lot. The body keeps score. And so one example of a very specific practice we do is one of Osho's active meditations called dynamic meditation. And so in the morning with the sunrise, ideally, it's a 1 hour, very embodied meditation. So it's almost a misnomer, if I'm using that term right, to call it a meditation, because it is not, sitting in lotus pose, trying to not think of things and get into that void space. It's a lot of movement. I mean, by the end of it, you're breathing hard, sweating. And the idea is to, in a sense, wear out the body and kind of fuck with the mind a little bit even, because these things are so chaotic and intense. There's catharsis, where for a 10-minute stretch within this 5-part 1 hour practice, I am consciously going mad. I am recalling and conjuring any emotion I can fathom. Joy, sadness, grief, anger, and I'm, hitting pillows on the ground. I'm flailing about. I'm screaming. I'm shouting. So we engage in that. And inevitably, that brings up some shit, as you might imagine. We'll do intense, like kind of breath of fire type of breathing, where it's coming out of the nose really high. I was about to do it, but I will snot all over my microphone if I do it right now. But just imagine going really hard like that for 10 minutes. Try doing that for a minute. It is fucking exhausting. And so once again, tapping into the energy of the biology, going down, deep into the body. And on the other side of it, after this hour of these various movements and activities, okay, what comes through when I'm in a more peaceful, relaxed, exhausted, but energized state, which is a little paradoxical? What clarity comes through? what inspired action wants to come through instead of maybe the manic action, the mania that can be omnipresent in a modern world. Like I'm in my office right now, and it's an office. It's a man-made thing. It's like everything around me it's natural in a sense, but it's not nature. And so it's tapping into, I think, our core nature is part of bioenergetics.
Super cool. Lots of stuff there. Just want to give my 2 cents there that may help the audience just get some more perspective into these practices. So sounds like exercises to move energy within the body. You mentioned The Body Keeps Score. If I'm not mistaken, that's a book too. And there's perhaps it's very well known, perhaps it's not, that a lot of our trauma and stored emotions are, let's say, in the hips and the pelvic floor area. And so with doing a lot of movement, breathing, and feeling the body sensationally, we're moving energy, we're moving emotions. Those are energies on the move. And so, as you're saying, by doing a lot of that, and chaotically sometimes, or perhaps sometimes more organized, but we're moving it, and now we're able to really feel and become more whole in that way, and notice and have the awareness. You touched on meditation. I think perhaps yes, the notion today that a meditation, it is the most traditional practice is seated. We're very still. We're getting into the void. We're shutting down the monkey mind. As I see it, meditation is just being present. It's just being aware. And then the awareness can go into the body, can go into sounds, it can go into vision. It can be while as I think many people know, for Lyme disease from Jamie Wheel, I forget his name, Jamie Wheel and Stephen Kotler. Yeah, so the answer was surfing. And that's a meditation right there. So getting into flow, just being. And as you're saying, I think, unfortunately, and I love the intellect. I thank the intellect every day before every meal that I have. I enjoy my intellect, although praising and overdoing something in the price of other things such as body, grounding, etc., and just overworking the mind, just like anything else, can come with detriments. And so I think, as you're saying, a lot of the chatter and a lot of talk therapy and a lot of mind. What can this person do with their mind? Has not been working for us in the past, who knows how many years, but let's kind of say the past few decades. And now, as you're saying, it's becoming a hot thing to do men's work, because men now are admitting, and it's more common now to talk about it, that things are not working for us. Things have not been working for us. They have not worked for our parents. Perhaps they have not even worked for our grandparents. Who knows how long this has been going? But I think now, with more, thanks to the internet and a lot of other sources, but now it's more commonly talked about and more okay to go into it. As you were also talking about the nice guy, pendulums have swung from macho to nice guy. I'm like, all the feminine, and I think coming to the center of being a masculine man, perhaps, or even a more feminine, but coming into more balance in that way, and realizing who we are. I mean, I realized about myself, I have a lot of feminine attributes. Does that mean I do my nails? No, but I am very nurturing. I like to make food for the kids, and there's all kinds of things that I do that I realize, like, these are feminine qualities for years. And I am more masculine in general. And aggression can come out, and all kinds of commending. And I'm from Israel. I'll just preface it for you and the audience. So I went through the army. I lived in Israel. There's a lot of hot energies going on just to get by, just to like survive in a masculine world within Israel. I had to really bump that up in some ways, in hindsight. And so there's a lot there. And as you talked about language with projections, or really taking responsibilities. And actually, that's something that I mentioned in my retreats when we talk about language, is that rather than saying, I just want to give the audience an example, something very simple, and saying like, oh, my wife pisses me off, or this person makes me angry. It's like, no, it's like, I get angry when they do that. Like, what is going on, as you're saying, underneath in my own reality, because I'm responsible, the full responsibilities. I'm responsible for everything in my life, my pains, my joys, everything at all times. And so if one doesn't want to buy into it, all good. But most likely, if they're listening to this podcast, they're into it, or perhaps they're like halfway there, and they're kind of like, all right, I'm hearing it. I'm going to take responsibility. Super cool.
I'm with you, man. Love it.
Yeah, it's huge. You know, it's 20 to 30 men. So you co-hosting with you said a mentor, Brendan. Are there more co-hosts? I just want to get a better picture so
Mhm.
people know more of what the ManMeet is about.
Yep. So I'm the host. It's my event. I take on all the responsibility and get guys there and organize everything. And I think one of my superpowers is I'm a super connector.
Mm.
And so I can bring diverse, awesome people together, both as attendees and facilitators. So I brought also my mentor, as life coach, best friend, father figure, big brother, one of my groomsmen. He just checks a lot of boxes. So he came and facilitated there as well. And same thing at my last ManMeet retreat that I did here in Austin. Kevin Oros, who one of my absolute best friends and one of my Mystic Misfit homies from back in the day, he was there and he led a workshop, as well as my older brother, the third Mystic Misfit. And so he did a freestyle workshop, initiation, a little rite of passage that the guys got to experience. And so, yeah, this is not all me. Yeah, I could and have led things that's completely me. And I recognize that, again, one of my greatest gifts is bringing unique people together that have their own skill sets that are different than mine, to make it an even more well-rounded experience. And so, yeah, I'll typically have anywhere from like 2 to 3-ish other people come in on each day of an experience. And then I'll have 1 to 2 of my own things each day. And then I MC and keep the event flowing in between. I'll start the day, end the day, those kinds of things.
No, awesome. And I've seen you do another program. It's a longer program. Is it a year long? I'd
Mhm.
love to hear about that program or anything else that you
Yeah.
offer in terms of this men's work. And I think
Yeah.
it'd be good to know.
Thank you for the opportunity, man. I love talking about the show. I'm so proud of what I've created. Um, so I have my year-long men's group that's called Unstoppable. And for that, similar thing, once a month, I have a guest facilitator come in. And uh, the other 3 weeks of the month, I do my thing. And I'll do typically 1 to 2, sometimes as much as 3, fairly significant rites of passage on each of these. And so it has, a lot of the similar core elements you would expect in a men's group where we're sharing, we're getting support, we're, going deep, authentic, vulnerability, all those wonderful buzzwords. Uh, where I might differ, my secret sauce, and not that I've created and invented all these things, but in my personal experience going through the buffet of personal development and going to a lot of events and being in other people's programs, I've, made my own out of all this.
Mhm.
It's like one example that we did a couple weeks ago is something that I call love thy neighbor. There's a lot of fun biblical undertones and influences in my stuff. I grew up with grandparents that were pastors of a charismatic church. And my dad is an evangelist, like through and through, who his highest excitement and greatest mission is to convert people to Christianity and to tell them about Jesus Christ and to save them, make them believers. I'm one of those people he's trying to save every day. And
Mm.
it's a fun journey just playing with that with him. But so love thy neighbor. What we'll do is each person on the call, and I have about 15 to 20 guys that are in this group at any given time as well. We will live in front of everybody, send a voice note or video to someone. And there's a couple different buckets of ways you could approach this. The low hanging fruit is just sending a love bomb. And it can just whoever you feel inspired to send a love bomb to in that moment. And that's a pretty easy one, right? Usually. So I'll encourage guys to go get a little bit more fun, comfortable, go a layer deeper. Is there someone in your life who you kind of don't have that type of relationship with? Maybe oftentimes it's a dad. We're doing the men's work and there's kind of father wounds, or there was just a lack of emotional awareness and presence in that relationship. And so sometimes it's like sending, 30 to 60 or second so voice note to dad and saying, hey, dad, just thinking about you. I want to tell you that I love you. I so appreciate the kind of dad you are, the person you are, the man you are, the example you've set for me. And we just feel like I wanted to share that with you. And that's it, right? Another layer, and this is where it gets particularly edgy. And I I take a hot minute to give a lot of context around this to make sure it's very clear and it's just done with the utmost awareness, sincerity, and effectiveness. Because ultimately, we can have an intention that is to do something good, but the impact maybe isn't in alignment with that intention. I think that's the higher level of discernment that men are called to, is like matching those up. It's never going to be perfect, fucking impossible. I can have the greatest intentions and the really impressive awareness, but the impact doesn't necessarily still land how I want it to. So the next bucket is some sort of clearing conversation. And the clearing conversation, I won't necessarily give all the context here, but it's just opening up the door to have a clearing conversation. So there's accountability there, right? So maybe I have an old uncle or an old friend is a really common one that we had some sort of falling out. Doesn't matter what it was, but I have stuck energy around that. I feel some regret, sadness, whatever it is. And so I want to go there. And so live in front of everybody, again, on video like this, we'll send a voice note. I'll send a voice note to somebody and say, actually, I have a great example for you right now with Kevin, since I referenced him and you know him. This was, I think, last year or so. I was feeling a little out of integrity in my relationship with him because I had engaged more than once in essentially talking shit about him behind his back. I could use fluffy language and make it sound better than that. And, not that it was the most intense, egregious things that I was saying, but I knew in my heart and my internal integrity, my compass was off. I loved that man. And I respect the shit out of him. And the way I was speaking about him was not cool. And so in front of everybody, I sent him a voice note and said that. I was like, hey man, I feel a little tension in my body. Been meaning to share this with you, but just have been avoiding it. And I want to tell you that I was kind of talking shit about, I was talking shit about you behind your back. Don't need to sugarcoat it. And I don't like that. I love you and I'm really sorry. And we can, if you want to, we can talk about that a little bit more and dissect it live together. But just felt that on my heart and I wanted to share it with you. And now the important thing to note there is Kevin he's on the same wavelength. He can receive that and even be playful about it. Him and I talked about it later and we're closer as a result. I wouldn't necessarily do that in that same way with someone else. So you really got to cater to your audience. And this is, again, the context that I give when we go into this activity. And so, what I'll usually do is less is more, keep it short and sweet, take ownership, don't get into specifics, and just open up the conversation and see if there's some consent and they're going to meet you. And then you could have a live conversation. And I guess the last thing I'll say about this activity is I have a pretty hard and fast rule with a very small wiggle room for previous partners, where we are not sending a voice note to an old girlfriend that we wronged, that we feel bad about, because usually it's self-serving. I have some sort of guilt. I did something that I don't feel good about, and I want forgiven. I want to be forgiven. I want approval. I want to feel better about myself, but they didn't ask for that. And so that's a really important nuance in this is chickadee check yourself before you riggedy wreck yourself, whether it's a previous partner or otherwise. Like, what is, again, intention and impact with this? And so that's one of the initiations we do that I think is a really cool one.
Yeah, it's super cool. How many men in Unstoppable group?
There's usually between 15 to 20 at any given time. And I do a quarterly enrollment. So next week, a new group of guys will be coming into the mix. It's a year-long commitment. And this setting's a little new and different that I've done before. I typically in the past have done anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks of these, and it would just be a defined container and then would take an off season. But I felt like a year just feels so much more like, dude, we can do a lot in a year. And these guys were already continuing to do things, longer than that. And it just held their feet to the fire and gave them more accountability. It was like, hey, let's go all in on this. Let's not just scratch the surface. Let's really dive in balls deep.
So, so weekly meetings,
Yep.
How long are the meetings?
Weekly meetings, about an hour and a half. Typically it's an hour and a half, but I tell them, have a half hour space after in case it goes a little bit over and to just give yourself a little transition time. So you aren't having to jump straight into something else potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have one off week every month. That off week, and this is where kind of the partnership with my wife comes into play. She has a women's group that is mutually exclusive, but the men and women, some of them are in partnerships and they do the all-in couples experience that we call it, where once a month, them as a couple, my wife and I lead a couples call. So they like play with one another, but you can be, a single man in my group, a single woman in my wife's group, or you can be couples together doing it as well.
Oh, super cool. I love the, like, how you're interweaving your work together there. There's something I want to talk about before we move on, on similar notes. And that's about the religion, the faith, the Christianity. You said your dad, that's his highest calling is to convert people. On his end is for Jesus Christ. But what I see, as I've over the years I came from, and I will say just to preface it, from being an atheist at a very young age to agnostic to meeting God, in Peru, up in the mountains on ayahuasca. It was just like a no-brainer, like slap, like, how do you even doubt me? So, I have my own, you can call it faith, right? And connection to source, however people want to call it these days. There's so many, as you said, buzzwords about everything right now. But I'd love to hear about your perspective on higher power or relationship.
Yeah. Okay. So I referenced some of my influences, and I'll go a little bit deeper there just for some more context. While my grandparents, pastors, and aunts and uncles, this church was in my family for 30 plus years. And my dad, he's 78 years old. He's got the joy of the Lord within him, just like unshakable faith. He, is a chaplain at a local hospital. He's there several times a week. He does prison ministry. Like, he's very committed to that. And so that was my family in Ohio, or in California rather, growing up. But I lived mostly with my mom in Ohio in my adolescence. And she was a single mom, partied a lot, was not home. So my house was the house where most of the firsts happened for people. First time you drank alcohol, you smoked weed, you got a hand job or kissed a girl, all that stuff is a lot of people's first were at my house. So I had these very different worlds and influences that I grew up with. Ohio was much more like lower middle class / even a little kind of grimy and poor Midwest small town. And California was like somewhat cookie cutter, Orange County / Southern California. My dad made me read the Bible for the 2 months of the summer that I was there visiting him and staying with him. So just this range and spectrum of experiences I'm really grateful for it. I think it served me really well. So just with that background and context, fast forwarding to today, I've gone through a journey that I think a lot of people do, and certainly differences, but especially when there's some level of notable religious influence. At one point, I was like, no, this doesn't, I'll never forget, man. In college, I went to San Diego State and I was in a fraternity, and that was a big part of my college experience. So very much a lot of the roots of men's work was my fraternity experience and brotherhood and ritual and all that kind of stuff. But I took a class that was exploring the Bible, and it was, just a lower division, like general education class. Oh, cool. That would be kind of interesting. And I remember for the first time, I got hit with, oh, wait a second, God didn't write the Bible. And it was this moment of, 19, 20 years old. And I just had this unconscious belief that like the Bible was written by God. Yes, divinely inspired, but I just glazed over that. And so that some people that'll resonate with is like, oh yeah, I hear that because of their religious influences growing up. And then from there, it was like, things were just opened up to me. The idea that, okay, religion is man-made on many levels. That's not to say that it's bullshit at all. Of course, there is some bullshit. And so from there, I just started to be much more curious and open about all of it. And I guess fast forward to now, with a little bit in between, one example of just a belief that I started to question was homosexuality and abortion. Two big ones, right? Let's go into the two big dogs. And I remember I had also the belief that being gay was simply wrong. It's you go to hell. Like it's just, there's no ifs, ands, or buts, even though there's lots of buts in there. That was not a great joke.
It actually is a good one.
And then there's abortion, which I had an abortion when I was in college. And this was a really wild experience because I was in the middle at that time of questioning, is abortion, one of the cardinal sin like that. And again, homosexuality are kind of like the two big ones. And I didn't feel like it was wrong or bad at the time. Like I felt guilt, but it didn't feel authentically like this is a wrong, bad thing. And I don't need to necessarily get into all the details there to describe that. But all that to say, I started to just form my own beliefs and consider like, what is God trying to tell me through my lived experience? And how can I get more and more open and attuned to that vibration, if you will? And then I think it started to get a little seductive, where it started to be a little self-serving. It's like, well, I want it to be this way, so I'm going to act as if it's this way, even if I'm not so sure that that's an authentic message from source. So I started to maybe swing the pendulum metaphor that you referenced, swing the pendulum the other way of like pantheism. I think that's the right term, where it's like everything is God and everything's okay and everything's beautiful and everything's wonderful and love and light and all that kind of stuff, which I think there's so much beauty to that. I'm so grateful to have had those experiences and influences. I would say more recently, and especially with my wife and I had a preterm late infancy loss. So at 22 and a half weeks, we lost our baby boy, Gabriel. And man, we found out he had Down syndrome like a couple weeks before this. A couple weeks before that, my dog of 12 years, my blue nose pit bull, Biggie James Smalls, passed away, who was like my son. I had him for a third of my life, like just experienced a lot of life with him. So that stretch of about a month of all this stuff happening, it's just brought me so much closer to a higher power in a way that words can't do it justice, but just a feeling and a sense of purpose and intelligent design in the midst of all that, where I could truly see there is, yes, I'm making meaning out of it, but fuck, it's too synchronistic to say it's just like random and I'm, conjuring this meaning. It's like, no, God is at play here. And this year, my wife and I have started to dabble with going back to a Christian church. We've found one here in Austin that we like. And I'm finding myself being drawn more back to that container. I don't feel any sort of dogma around it. I say any sort of, perhaps a little bit. Again, some of the upbringing is strong. It's deep in the DNA, I suppose. But I'm approaching it now much more as there's a lot of beauty and good here. I love like the first 30 minutes of church where it's worship, and some of the words and the things, I'm like, I do my best to check my mind at the door because my mind will pick this shit apart. It's just ruthlessly. But if I can just put that aside and be like, I don't need to get lost in the sauce of all of that. What am I feeling? What is God trying to speak to me in the message that the pastor's giving? All, again, the religiosity aside. And when I leave, I feel closer to God. I feel more aware of myself and my place in it all. So all that to say, we are finding ourselves as a family committing to a more organized, regular practice of connecting to God. And that's the container that we're in right now. And that feels good.
Super beautiful. And
Thank you,
I said
man.
it before we jumped on. Super sorry for your loss of, you know, son and the dog. Of course, that's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, interesting relationship you're rebuilding with the divine. Do you think there's something that is not God? Do you think there's something in this on this earth, let's say, that is not of creation,
Mm.
is outside?
Yeah, it's such a great question. The short answer is no. I do think that's where maybe I differ from Christianity in a sense. Um, I do think everything is God. I think there is. That's such a funny phrase to say. That feels true for me. That everything is of God. That everything is part of God. Uh, we can get into we can do the fun thought experiments beyond that and other components of it. But the short answer is yes, I do.
You said it feels funny to you to say what was that? Let's say
Yeah,
unknown or unfamiliar sensation. The unfamiliar
yeah.
sensation is that inside of you, you feel like everything is God. Would you say that's an unfamiliar sensation?
I think that it's reconciling a lot of the Christian religious influences that would say that notion is heresy, you know, or like uh, it's a combination of that, but then the other end of the spectrum, I think sometimes like I got kind of caught in this again, I use the word seductive, insidious. I think it has some little serpenty undertones, if you will, where I I want to be mindful to not leverage this idea that everything is God to again be self-serving,
Mhm.
to then engage in potentially manipulative practices both toward myself and others and justify my actions and sort of live in a blissfully naive existence that is just not becoming of the grounded masculine force that I want to be in this world. I think there's a stand for truth that can be compromised when it's like everything's God, it's all God. Uh, so that's
Yeah.
kind of where my
Okay.
hesitancy comes into play.
Good distinction there. And I want to say that the first thing that comes just to mind is a reflection of that. And it's something that I learned recently. I'm going to say learn because this is my understanding of the truth is that there's a difference between belief and faith. And belief is that I imagine that
Mm,
this is true. And I think that a lot of Christianity, not a lot of, but let's say the parts of Christianity that don't feel true, that feel uncomfortable, that seem um, out of alignment with God's order or God's will, are ideas that perhaps I don't even know if that's the case, were edited from the original Bible. So perhaps yes, God in some ways, instilled those ideas, and people were channeling it. I'm thinking about the Jewish people, the Ten Commandments. Moses going up, the burning bush is burning a bunch of DMT. He's having a straight connection there. It's close to God as possible. It's like thou shalt not kill, etc., etc. Like, yeah, absolutely. Like this feels like in integrity with all
mhm.
sentient beings. Now, there's perhaps some other things that, let's say, if one would do that, and let's talk about for example, to touch on homosexuality and abortion. If one would
Mm,
do that, they're going to hell. Now, I
yeah.
think in all that all of God, I think that's an expression of God, and however that is. Are there sometimes better options for abortion? I think over time we'll come up with better models where if one is pregnant and there's already life that wants to come to this world, there will be a program that makes sense to bring them into a household, that there's a win-win. For now,
Mm,
however that may be, sometimes the answer would be to perhaps not bring this energy into the world, because that will be bringing a lot of suffering for that energy and others. And so I want to say, with
no.
the distinction that I have, is the faith is like, when we get back to the somatic work, what do I feel in my heart?
Mhm.
You really, and that's a skill that I've been honing for years, and there's way to go,
Yeah.
ways to go, and I love to laugh a lot about a lot of things, and make all the jokes about it, and sure, we can find. I think when you talk about distinction of the voice inside, I would say like, yeah, that's all God. Like I can, right now it feels like God wants to go and, he's married, I'm married, but it's a great party out here, and it's just the
Uh-huh.
lust feels amazing, and it's not a big deal. God wants to have fun.
Mhm.
Yes, God wants to have fun. Now we're coming back to greater good. We're coming back to integrity. The name of my men's
Mhm.
community and the retreats that are on are under this umbrella. It's called Men of Integrity. The biggest thing is to be
Mm.
in integrity with oneself, to become a better
Yep.
man, father, husband, son, Samaritan. We talk
Yep.
we talk about not polarity per se, but we talk about polarized relationships, just neutrons and protons. Feminine and masculine, doing a dance. Yeah, I mean, I
Mhm.
know perhaps on social media and such, I think a lot of the men that come to our retreats, and they're pretty intimate. They're 6 participants. We have 3 to 4 facilitators. They never even heard of polarity. Like they're not
Mm.
walking around on going to Sun Life Organics and sitting on a crystal and getting up their balls. I'm all about it. And when I've seen, so I don't spend a ton of time on social media, but the calling sometimes, the guidance, right, for us to have a conversation. One of the things that I loved about seeing with you is like almost never wear a shirt, and you said chesticles, and that's, I mean, that's the fact that I'm wearing a shirt is to be presentable. I'm sure some
Saying.
people would want to see some nipples right now, but at the end of the day, shorts or a bathing suit. That's how I live, I mean, and that's it. I enjoy
Mhm.
it. I enjoy the sun. I enjoy the freedom. I enjoy the monkeyness of it. There's my friend's dog was named Chester. I call him Chesticle, and so I think I think, and it's something that I say with as I came quite a long way from atheist to being like, if my family went through the Holocaust, how could there be a God? To now, like, yes, it's all God. Like we chose, I
Mm.
chose perhaps in past lives, my lineage, etc., to be in the situation, to be the abusee, and God playing another part of being the abuser, because that's part of the Dark Ages. That's part of descending of feeling. It all gets back to feeling in the sake of experience, in my opinion, at least. This
Mm.
is all a creation for the sake of playing this game. Sometimes this game is rough and dirty, and it's a fucking shit show. To be very
Mhm.
clear, I've had by now numerous times, mostly on plant medicine, when I'm getting thrown back into these places. I'm surrendering into them, and it's as hard as it gets. Like it's hard as a motherfucker. And I get back, and I went back to the Holocaust a few times, and what I did, talk about emotional alchemy. I was alchemizing and doing really what the buzzword generational trauma healing. Just coming in like, all right, I'm ready to strangle, I'm ready to kill again. Eye for an eye, as I'm being
Mm.
terrorized, but I like kind of get through it and get through the anger, and let it be, and come with love, because I know by now that there's no other choice. It's much easier to talk about right now as I'm sitting in my home here. I'm chilling. I went through these experiences already. When I get there, it's a motherfucker. So yeah, I wanted to share my perspective, because I think it's good to hear. It's good to hear for a lot of people the distinctions that I've been noticing,
Mm.
and I'm speaking through the computer, God's creation. I'm very thankful for it, and just like anything, when
Mm.
I could get lost here on Wikipedia or YouTube or social media with all kinds of things that perhaps I have some interest in, or I can stay focused and listen to like, what is my purpose? One, what are my
Mm.
gifts? And really, I mean, what else am I here to do? Yeah, I mean, I'm all about
Mm.
enjoying myself too. And something I talked to a friend yesterday is that when one perhaps is living with alignment with their purpose, and it's spiritual, etc., and putting kind of working with the ego, it's not that they're not looking for appreciation at all, but it's they're not dependent on external validation and appreciation. They will still enjoy appreciation,
Mm.
success, everything else. If anything,
Yep.
it will come more, but it's not the dependency on it, and just constantly looking for it, and being energized by that validation. And so I put my intentions and aspirations for how things go. I do my prayers now. It doesn't, yes, it does not look like the one in the movie where I'm kneeling by the bed and asking God to heal my rib injury of 3.5 years. But, there's all kinds of, or whatever, bring me a house in Malibu. But there's all kinds of aspirations and intentions that I'm constantly, looking for. What is this calling that I have? And I'm constantly being guided to do things. This conversation is being guided to
Mm.
do it, because I'm not spending a good amount of time there. Something comes up, and that leads, and I reach out, I take some action. Yeah, I mean, I figured I'll share this perspective because I think
Mm.
it can bring a lot of peace. And I think, as you were saying about the church, like you're putting your mind aside, perhaps you're checking it out and you're feeling the sensations. What it sounds like,
Yeah.
you're looking for this new to intensify or put some structure on your practice of connection to God because you feel more whole by doing it. You just feel
Yeah.
wholeness. That's it. Wholeness, holiness, however want to call it, but it feels good. Period. What
Yeah.
does feel good? Sometimes we'll do some things that don't feel good, knowing they're going to lead, as you were saying with the message to Kevin, like it's going to lead to better good. It's going to be uncomfortable now, but I know it's the right thing to do. It's
Yeah.
not just about being comfortable all the
Mm.
time, but yeah, quite a rant there. But
Dude, world-class rant. Like, I'm picking up what you're putting down. I had a moment when you're in the midst of that transmission where I was like, this dude's fucking cool. Where
thank
I
you.
just like, yeah, it feels very easy and fun to shoot the shit with you. And I look forward to potentially someday in person connecting with you because I think that we got some like-heartedness and we'd have some fun together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think is perhaps some of the men listening to this, men in my community, future men in your community, etc. They can feel that they were doing this out of integrity. And as you said at the beginning,
Mm.
there's a good amount of work that comes to making these retreats and work happens. And
Mhm.
it's a lot. A lot. Sometimes just having the
It
conversations,
is.
the one-on-one conversations, somebody reaching out and getting this, stuff organized together and places falling through and Airbnbs and there's a lot of variables. I do want to
Mhm.
hear a little bit because I think once again the union of whatever relationships, I'm going to call it ideally a polarized relationship, but you and your wife
Mhm.
got something special going on. Before we jump into that, I'd love to hear how you met.
Yes. It's a really cool story. I love telling it. And I used to tell it a lot. I don't get as many opportunities to tell it nowadays. So thank you. Uh, we're coming up on our 2-year anniversary for getting married, and we've been together for almost 6. I met her on Facebook. So keep in mind, 6 years ago, social media was a little bit different. But I don't remember exactly the first point of connection. But if I know myself like I think I know myself, I suspect it went a little something like this. Mutual friends on Facebook, there's like the suggested friends little function there. Hot, tatted up chick talking about sex, add friend. That's how it went down. And so she is that sex chick on Instagram. That's her brand. She's been a sex educator for almost a decade now. And so that was how I was exposed to her. I was living in San Diego. She was living in New Orleans, where she's from. And from there, I don't know, maybe 6 months of kind of creeping from afar, if you will. You could say I was coming out of my conscious fuckboy stage where, okay, I'd kind of gotten into this game of personal development. It was doing a lot for me personally, and I was like getting good at it and even like leading people through stuff. And I was exploring, I was coming out of this whole anti-game is the best game and leveraging that in like romance. I was like, oh man, if I'm authentic with women, they love this shit. Like I can do this dance and I'm being very honest and open with my intentions. But I was starting to feel a calling to another level of stewardship where it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, I can justify that I'm being forthright and open with these women on my intentions and all these things. And yet there was another level that was like, and you know better. You can do better than this. Just because you're checking the boxes, I was feeling and my integrity was starting to expand. And as I was happening, I'm seeing Alexa online. Lex is what I call her. And the long story shortish, we were both sharing how we were going through a breakup publicly on like Facebook Lives. And we were kind of like, we were peeping each other as we were doing this and liking and commenting a little bit. And finally, one day, I sent her a voice note and I opened it with a little freestyle rap. And it was something like, I cringe, but also acknowledge my previous self and the courage that he had. But it went a little something like, hey, Alexa, I'm about to flex for you. I want to stand next to you. And then whatever else I said. And then I followed up with you seem so awesome. I would love to get to know you. And that started the direct line of communication. And 2 weeks later, I flew out to New Orleans to meet her. I worked for a company, Bulletproof, at the time. A lot of people are familiar with like Bulletproof Coffee and Dave Asprey and the podcast and all that. So I was a traveling salesman, and New Orleans is one of my territories. I use quotation marks because New Orleans is not a place I would just go to. I could justify going to, but I did for this purpose. And that weekend, I
Work
stayed
trip.
with her.
Baller
Work trip, exactly.
Baller move
All
right there.
expenses paid, baby.
Love it.
And so that weekend was, oh, dude, I'm going to give you the part that I don't always share because I think it's just very appropriate. I feel the flow in this conversation of going there. Leading up to flying out there, she asked me, when was the last time you were tested for STIs? And I felt this, it's been a while, several years. And there was this, and again, being called into higher integrity, there was a fear that I could have something I didn't know about type of thing. And so I got tested. And when I got there, I found out that I had chlamydia. And it was like and it was about a day after I got there that I found this out. And I was already leading up to this. I felt I was falling in love with her. I just had this knowing of like, this is wild. Like I've experienced infatuation, all these things. But I'm feeling some stuff that I've never felt in this way. So then as we're actively together falling in love, I get this notice that I had chlamydia. So I'm terrified to tell her, right? I'm like, oh my, this is going to be ruined before it ever even really starts. Motherfucker. So I tell her, and she just smiles. She has almost like a little snicker of sorts. She goes into the bathroom and out of the medicine cabinet pulls out some antibiotics and gives them to me. She's a sex educator, and her sister's a nurse. And so it's something that like people had, they were afraid to do whatever. She just had this accessible to be able to give to me in that moment. And it was just such an affirmation from the universe of like, yeah, honesty is the best policy. Be in ruthless integrity with yourself, trust, and it'll all work out. And so the end of that weekend, we were parting ways. We're in the airport, and I started to give her a bit of the talk of like, okay, what are we? And I said, look, I'm going to say something. I have to say, I'd be remiss if I didn't say this before leaving. And I want you to know that before I say it, I have no expectation of any sort of reciprocity. If this is coming from me and my heart and my authenticity. And as I'm just giving all these disclaimers, she cuts me off and says, I love you too.
Wow.
And we made love right there in the parking lot. That part's a joke. I love to just say that because she loves when I tell this story and at that park because it's one of my little one-liners. But yeah, we embraced. It was just like out of a movie, man. Like met this girl on the internet, flew out to meet her, told her I loved her, and now we're married and starting our family. And so that's the story.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So then did she move? Did you move? What was the living situation from that point?
So I had, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 more months on my lease at the time in San Diego. And she had around the same for hers in New Orleans. Actually, she had longer. And so we did the long distance thing for about 4, 5, 6 months. And actually a couple weeks after that initial meeting, we met in Costa Rica for Envision Festival. And that was when like we really kind of sealed the deal of our love being at a festival together. And then it was just like she would come stay with me for a week. I would stay with her for a week. And we were just doing that thing back and forth pretty consistently. I had a companion pass for Southwest. So I would just kind of take her with me anywhere I could, make an excuse to. And I was doing a lot of traveling again for Bulletproof. So I would just take her on work trips with me. It was great. And then I eventually moved in with her in New Orleans for a handful of months, which was really cool, getting to experience like her family and just the rich culture that is there. And then we moved to Austin shortly thereafter, and we've been here for about 5 years.
Wow. Beautiful story. Thank you for sharing. Beautiful, beautiful love story. Woo. That's a good one. Yeah, I'd love to hear, so were you doing the men's work before you met her? What was how did you come together as kind of like the yin and yang in that way, or,
Yeah.
masculine, feminine that way? Yeah, I'd love to hear.
I was definitely doing like personal men's work and leading men at that point, but I didn't own that I'm a men's coach and I'm doing like men's work. It was more Mystic Misfit days. Like we are, leading retreats. We had like these little monthly misfit mixers that we called them. And so but it was kind of open to everyone. It was just the first iterations and experiments of all this stuff that we were learning. We were sharing it with other people. Um, I wouldn't say that I fully stepped into the men's thing and just owned that until, yeah, a couple years later. So we're looking at maybe like a few years ago where I really was like, no, this is love women, but like I'm called to work with men. And so as far as like our journey together in a professional capacity, you know, it's a really cool idea to work with your partner. It just sounds lovely. Sounds like, oh yeah, if you're like kind of in the same world, why would you not? Well, I can give you many reasons why you wouldn't. And we navigated that early on. At first it was, we would do little things together and it was like fun and felt casual and easy. And then it was like, okay, honeymoon season, that stuff is fading in a sense, meaning we're getting into, if we're going to be together forever, for our entire lives, we're all in committing in this way. What does that look like to be in a sustainable, deeply loving, polarized relationship? And it's like, okay, we kind of have to pick and choose what we want to focus on, certainly at least early on. And I think that's just the perpetual game of it all. And we attempted to work more closely. And it was like, okay, no, the entanglement is too strong. Like we're roommates, we're romantic lovers, and we're now trying to be business partners. And it's like, dude, where does this start and that ends? And it just was a lot. And frankly, we were not equipped to effectively manage that. And so we let our business stuff be separate for a while. I was still working for Bulletproof and doing the coaching and retreats as just a side hustle hobby, and passion. And then when I left Bulletproof, it was like, all right, now I'm going all in. And that was when I owed being men's coach and moving in that direction. And she was still doing her thing as a sex educator. And then over the course of like a year, we were just like, we would have the conversation periodically, just a little like heat check in. And I guess it was about coming up on 3 years ago that we officially decided to fully join forces. And we were just in a much better, like we had a much stronger foundation to where we felt equipped to do that. And it ain't all rainbows and butterflies, like we are mindful to stay in our lanes, to, compartmentalize very appropriately. Like I'm in my office right now. This is my fucking office.
Yeah.
It's my safe space. Like it stays in here. She has her office on the opposite side of the house. And like, this is kind of a silly example, but I used to frequently work from the kitchen table or from like the island. And I started to track, oh no, this is not good. This is muddying the waters. We get in conversations and then things start to bleed into, it's like, wait, are we business partners in this moment, in this conversation, or are we lovers? Are we roommates? Or, what are we doing here? And so picking up on a lot of these little nuances that make a big difference. And I suppose maybe the last thing I'll say on this rant for now is we do a relationship check-in, which is something we actually created a whole structure for this. And it's a little freebie download that people can get. And it changed everything for us. We just got much more awareness, we started treating our relationship and the entity of it. We sometimes call it Jorlexa, Jordan and Alexa, Jorlexa, this transcendent quality, this entity that is our relationship. We need to treat this like it's the most important business in our lives and like it is sacred as fuck. And we hadn't really been doing it up until that point. So a few years ago, we started really doing that. And that changed everything. It's this very comprehensive check-in where we just look at all the various aspects of our lives, look at our calendars. We have a shared calendar. We do movement together. We plan love trips, weekly date nights, monthly deep dives. It's this whole thing. And that's really helped us stay in connection and be able to do all these things together and still stay in harmony and stay in love and still be super attracted to each other and maintain the polarity and all that kind of stuff.
Super cool. Great experience. Divine led. And so that sounds like
Indeed.
part of those monthly calls for the work that you're doing together. Or
Yeah,
very cool.
exactly.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
So we'll lead them through various things like that and tantra practices and kink and BDSM and like how do we keep this thing spicy?
Mhm. How does does your dad have a view on the work that your wife is doing, that you're
Mhm,
doing? How does he?
mhm. I love that you asked that. So as it goes, in a lot of ways, I've become my dad's teacher. It feels weird to say that. I feel some tension in my body.
Mm,
Make no mistake, he is still very much my teacher, and I respect him as an elder, and I love him, and he's my dad. Which let me just give you a little taste of my dad. Uh, he calls me every day. He called me like 20 minutes ago while we are on this, and he leaves me a message. And here's like a standard message that my dad will leave me. Hey, best son, it's your best dad. I was just driving along the freeway, thinking about you, praying for you. How's my best son doing today? This is like my dad just has this affection with his words and this just deep desire to tell me and show me how much he loves me. And there's, there's some trauma and some stuff there. He wasn't there during most of my childhood, my adolescent years, like I said, living in Ohio. And, I just actually got to see him in California because that's where he lives last week when I was out there. And yeah, he gives me a hug and he kisses me somewhere randomly on my head and says, "You'll never be too old for your daddy to hug and kiss you." And then he's a big dude and he'll like squeeze me and then kind of throw me away. It's almost like the intimate, like, yeah, he wants to be intimate, but there's still some of this old school stuff about what that looks like. And he'll kind of weirdly throw me away. So anyway,
wow.
side convo about my dad. So I think I've, in a lot of ways, been able to expose him to these, call them radical perspectives and ways of living and work that we do in a way that he can mostly connect with because I'm his son and he loves, respects, and trusts me and knows that even though my path is maybe not the traditional Christian path, he can see, to use some of his language, my tree bears good fruit,
Mm,
and he has been to some of my events or at least like popped in. He knows my friends and like the guys that I work with. And so he sees it. And so he can't help but acknowledge that there is a lot of beauty there. And so I think it's just expanded his capacity to just be curious and open and acknowledge once again that, okay, there's some good stuff happening here. And that's maybe as far as the edge will go,
so
which is great.
it's beautiful. Beautiful relationship. I think it's actually a natural progression that, um, a son is coming of age and becoming, a father. I mean, you're a father to the dog, you're a father to your son for a brief time there. I'm sure you'll have more children. It has
Mm,
some things even before they become a father, have things to teach their parents.
mm,
My children teach me stuff every day. A lot of times in a
sure.
reflection way. I have a 4.5-year-old daughter, I have a 1-year-old son, and I have a puppy, and they teach me a lot of just being the mirror, but they do teach me
Mhm.
anyways. And so yeah, that's super beautiful. I'm curious, you mentioned your brother. How many siblings are you?
So my older brother is my only full sibling, same dad, same mom.
Who's
Then I have an older,
who's that brother?
that's Ryan.
That's right. Okay.
Ryan.
Okay.
Yep. Who have you know him? Have you met him or
I've
you know of him maybe?
I've just seen him on the Mystic
Okay.
Misfits. That's as far as it goes.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Yeah, so he lives here in Austin. He's my best friend. Mm, And then I have an older sister who is my half sister, same mom, different dad. Then I have a younger brother and sister who are twins that are, you could say, like half step in the sense that they're adopted, but they're adopted at birth.
Mm.
So there's not like blood there specifically, but same dad, different mom. And my little
Nice.
sister also lives here in Austin. And my little brother lives with my dad and stepmom in California, and he has mild autism. So
Mm.
that's my blended family.
Wow. Wow. Quite the range of family and experiences.
Mhm.
I'm curious about your relationship with Ryan, because I mean, I've seen a little bit
Mhm.
of, of him, and I'd love to hear from you if you can share more about a relationship.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I'll start with a little childhood because I think it just paints the picture and sets a little foundation. He's about 4 years older than me, a little less than 4 years. And when my parents got divorced and we moved to Ohio, I was not even 3. And and then there was like a revolving door of biker boyfriends that my mom had. And so there was no strong, father figure. And my Ryan, my brother Ryan was the, eh, on some level served as the pseudo dad. And
Wow.
it feels weird to say that because he didn't, he shouldn't have been, he wasn't good at it. No, no knock on him at all. But I guess maybe I say that because he was the best thing that I could consistently look to as an older man that was consistent in my life. And so he was, yeah, my protector in a lot of ways. Like I was terrified of the dark when I was a kid. And my mom was at home. So there was like no adult in the house. And then there's not my dad, obviously, who like represents strength and protection and the boogeyman or whatever ghost can't stand up to my fucking dad. So Ryan, my brother, I would sleep in his room, often when I was afraid. But at the same time, he, did not have that masculine direction. And he was, the problem child. He'd, get in trouble in school and hung out with like rough kids. And yeah, he was just, that was him.
Mm.
And I saw how that triggered my mom. And you can just see how all this fits together. Like my mom, big emotions, like feminine storm, substance abuse, like all that was just like, whoa. And he got the brunt of a lot of that. And so what I learned was be the good little boy, be the people pleaser, be the nice guy, do well in school, be in sports, all that kind of stuff. Like don't make noise, don't be challenging. So that was kind of like my role to counterbalance how my brother had shown up and like what happened to him as a result of that.
Wow.
So that was like our upbringing. And fast forwarding to today, we are, I mean, he's like I said, he's my best friend. Like I love him so much. We've been fortunate to be able to do a lot of work together, both in the Mystic Misfits, and he often is a part of my men's groups and will be like one of my support coaches, or he'll come to one of my retreats and like hold down his amazing gifts and skill set as a leader. And what else could I say about him? We call him Kevin and I in the Mystic Misfit days, and still today we call him the General because Ryan the Lion, he's a Leo, and he's just got this courage, this willingness to say the unpopular, fun, comfortable thing, but say it in a way, and he's very much been a model to me in this, in a way that can maintain the person's dignity. Like if I'm saying something to someone, or if he's saying something to someone that's like, ooh, that's an edge, they might be offended by that, but it's there's just truth there that needs to be communicated. He is just so good at doing it in a way that kind of disarms that person. Again, maintains their dignity, which is such an art form to be a perpetual lifelong student of. And yeah, those are some snippets of my bro.
It's beautiful. Sounds like you're living a beautiful path with an amazing wife, amazing family, great experiences. I'm in awe by your life and how you're leading it. Yeah,
Thanks, brother.
the kind of as we come to a closing, I want to hear if you can describe or recall a recent experience or an experience from the past that blew your mind.
Ooh, the first one that comes to mind, it's a dense one. I referenced my wife and I's recent experiences. And so she gave birth to our son, Gabriel. And we got to spend an hour and a half with him before he passed. And it was like, and again, we had found out he had Down syndrome, and we were just getting into a pretty decently solid surrendered state of like, okay, this is going to look different than we were planning. But this is the divine plan. And so we're going to be awesome parents to this Down syndrome boy. I was calling him my Downy dude because I have nicknames for everything and everyone. And like, we're going to be advocates for the community. And no sooner do we surrender to that, that then this happens, this premature birth. And he was right in that spot where we had, so we were presented with the impossible decision. As this is all, we're in the hospital and it's just things are happening so fucking fast. And we have to decide, do we do anything and everything to try and save his life? Or do we surrender and be with him in whatever life that he has and just let it unfold? And so on the one hand, my humanity and in my just desperation, it's like, well, of course, how can I not do anything and everything to save my little boy's life? And yet, the irony is that actually felt selfish. It felt like unnatural. It felt like I was forcing something that was not what wanted to happen. And if he survived, it was going to be like a moment to moment, day to day thing. They were immediately going to take him as soon as he came out of the wound, if he was even alive coming out of the wound, because we didn't know, and be transferred to another hospital in a NICU. And if he makes it, best case scenario is that he is extremely disabled for the rest of his life. And that wasn't even counting the Down syndrome diagnosis. That was independent of that X factor. So we're just getting presented this information. And so then we decided to just, again, surrender. And when he came out, he's a full-on little human, man. Like, he cried instantly, which was like, holy shit. But my wife and I looked at each other and were like, is that what we think it is? And then they bring him up to her chest and they had me cut the cord. And they were just, the staff there were so awesome. We planned to do the home birth or we're going to potentially do a birthing center and midwives and a bit more of that old school approach. But that's just not how things unfolded. And the staff there, though, were just so awesome. They treated it very sacredly and like kind of normally in a good way. And so, yeah, they put him on my wife's chest and we're just loving on him. We're praying over him. We're praying to each other. And we're just in this surreal state and energy of absolute reverence and absolute like sadness and grief. Yes. But it was superseded by this, oh my God, this is our son. And he's whimpering and he's, got all of his appendages and he's like moving and, again, small and fragile, but nonetheless a full on little human. And that just blew my mind. So when you asked me, like, being in the presence of that and then him taking his last breaths as he just was slowing down over the course of that hour and a half, that was fucking mind blowing, man.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. That's sure that was hard, but also as you're feeling called to do that. And I've seen that you and your wife shared quite a bit of the journey, and I think that's super powerful and helpful for people to get like a view and into the whole process, because one, either they went through it, they're going to go through it, somebody didn't know they was going to go through it. It's very special, and I really salute you and your wife for doing that. I can only imagine. I can't really of how hard it is to even write those words and to share and some of the comments and to get everything else in order, just feeding yourselves. And yeah, it's I have to say, and it's I don't know, to be honest with you, I don't know how appropriate it is or not, but as it comes to me, I try to empty myself of the ego and really channel what comes to me. And I'm no channeler by any means of the people that like you go to and see, but I am getting more guidance. And something was telling me while you're telling the story that was not, that was not the last meeting by any means. As I see these energies going now, is my new perspective, let's say, or my new knowing perhaps, of how life goes. And you and your wife and you and your son that came briefly, it's first of all, I always see them as they're always together, but perhaps the proximity, it feels like,
Mm,
okay, like you really, let's say, and I don't know, really don't know, I'm just gonna throw some words in there and say pass the test of
mhm,
surrender. And now
mm,
here he comes back. Whether he comes back now in this life as a boy, as a girl, I don't know. But it's by
mm,
no means, this was like, in the way I see it, such a brief, well, hey, we're together now. And then you get together
mm,
and keep going. I think it's huge. The surrender to, and as I was thinking, we talked about abortion earlier, but it's just like, what is being in the third dimensional body? And he's talking about sports, talk about anything else that we're doing in here. There's a certain, I think, basic level of function that is making this experience more meaningful and enjoyable. And it's just the forcing part sometimes. And I think everything is divine. Whoever is in whatever state, in their bodies right now, that's the state that they're meant to be in, whatever lessons they have from them and their families and their communities. But letting things flow rather than trying to force them. I think when we try to force things, that's usually when it's sometimes
mm.
perhaps unnecessary suffering. So yeah.
Yeah, that resonates deeply on so many levels, and that has been one of the greatest lessons in this season is surrender and faith. They're kind of cheesy,
Well,
cliche, personal development things, but no, like I'm getting a serious lesson
yeah.
in all that. And I mean, I could say so much more, but just one other little tidbit I'll throw in here is, before that, with my pup passing, he had a cancerous tumor. And again, like that was 12 and a half years, my fucking guy. I have him tattooed on my leg. Like we lived out of my car together. Like that was my dude. And I was battling for several months as I was just getting more information. Do I do anything and everything I can to save him? And I just kept coming back to surrender. And my first, call it spiritual, yeah, spiritual personal development teacher, my uncle, my aunt and uncle who I lived with in part of high school, that were also pastors in that same church. But they were kind of radical,
Yeah.
showed, taught me about fear and love before I could ever conceptualize what that means and looks like in my everyday life. I'll never forget a conversation I had with my uncle a few months back where he was just beautifully guiding me into this place of surrender and just asking the right questions to help me get to a place of, yeah, I get to let my dog son go. And, I don't have to fight tooth and nail. And I want to, there's a time to fight, right? There's a time to fight. There's a time to try and save and all those kind of things. But that's kind of easy. It's a little funny to say that, but it's like easy to fight. When it's like, especially when it feels like I have to because of my own, like I need to do it for me. It's fuck, it can be really challenging to just let go. And maybe I'll just end this little mini rant with a phrase that my mentor, the guy I was referencing earlier in this conversation, said that just it packs a punch. Have the courage to let go when you most want to hold on, and to hold on when you most want to let go.
Deep, powerful.
It's deep, man. Yeah.
That's deep. Yeah, I love it. And as you said, I think about some of the words, whether it's surrender and what was the other one, faith, and yes, there are perhaps some cliche words, but when you get down and dirty to it, I mean, the experience you just
Yeah.
had with your wife, it's no cliche. It's the real deal lessons and experiences that we chose or choose to experience. And yeah, it's big respect to the ones who go through those rites of passage. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Much respect to you, my man, and much love. So, unstoppable new cohort, or just jumping into the cohort. How do these things happen? There's every few months.
Yep.
How do people find you?
Exactly. Yep. All the things. I am most active on Instagram at Jordan Bowditch. Last name is Bowditch, Bowditch. And yeah, the Unstoppable Men's Group, I do like quarterly enrollments. So yeah, every 3 months, roughly, I'll add a handful more guys to it. I do. And with that comes an event. So a lot of guys that were at this last event are part of the men's group, and it comes with that package. And I'll probably do another one of the ManMeet summits, similar kind of setting in San Diego or Austin. And yeah, my wife, same thing. She has what she calls Love Leader, the women's group, and we are on the same cadence of the quarterly enrollments. And yeah, that's kind of, if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see what I'm up to.
Right on. Amazing. Thank you, Jordan, for everything
Thanks
today and
me,
for
man.
the work you're doing. Really, really appreciate it. Me and
This was a lot of fun.
absolutely.
It really was.
We'll definitely do another one, folks. All right. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, everybody, for listening. See you in the next one. Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope this conversation has supported your journey to wholeness. For full show notes and to explore all my projects, visit yonihavana.com. If you found the show helpful, please leave a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support helps spread awareness, healing, and awakening to others. Much love and gratitude.